My name is David Fernández. I'm from Spain. I'm an indie game developer that has worked on several mobile games, but I'm most known for working on Moonlighter, an indie game about a merchant that dreams with being a hero. In the most basic expression, an inventory system should be a way to manage a set of items. It doesn't matter where those items are: consumables, equipment, skills. So when you are making a game, you are all the time thinking how much time players are going to be looking at your inventory. For example, in Moonlighter, we were all the time thinking about that. How much time will they stop the game in the dungeon to look at the inventory? And how much time they are going to spend is something critical to maintain that pace. For example, we have a lot of critical rules when we were making the inventory of Moonlighter, but one of our main focus was to reduce how much time players needed to identify each different object. Also, how much time do they need to apply changes to that inventory? Like, for example, move an item from here to here, or just to drop an item on the floor, things like that. You could move items from one inventory to another, from your backpack to a chest. You could do that with one button. Then we had to design another control to take those items from the chest to your inventory, to your backpack. And that's something that seems easy, and that's something that seems natural, but when you are using a gamepad or a keyboard, it starts to give you problems, like really quick. Half of our development time was polishing user interfaces, and especially those regarding the general inventory management. It's a core mechanic for Moonlighter. What we tried since the beginning to make half of the mechanics about combat and half of the mechanics to be about being a merchant. When you are thinking about your items, when you are thinking about how much gold you have in your backpack, you are thinking about the items you are carrying. It also links the dungeon part with the merchant part of the game, making sure that players have that inventory in both parts of the game, so they could realize the value of the items they were carrying all the time. Actually, when we were developing Moonlighter, we had this mechanic where you could see how much money each item was worth, but we decided to remove that because when we did that, you no longer paid attention to the item, you only paid attention to the money. That was not the way. Yeah, it's good if you remember how much an item is worth. That item is helpful for you to make a recipe or something like that. That's awesome. But the first thing is for you to value each item. For you to think, oh, this seems really valuable, I'm going to stick with it. We thought that the inventory was already valuable for the game, but we wanted to add some more flavor to it. Especially after you've been playing for a couple of hours, it's more interesting if you have those effects that we added to the game, those curses. They really help us make the inventory more interesting because they play with choices. When you have this really strange item that is possibly really valuable because you have found it in the third floor of a dungeon, that item is really valuable, but it's more valuable if that item has a curse that can transmute the item on the left to become a copy of the item with a curse. That makes you decide, so I can basically duplicate this item like a glitch or a bug, but I can do it if I master this puzzle. And that's something that makes you feel smart, that makes you feel like you are making a good choice. It sure makes you think about what item are you going to discard, because we only give you those type of items when you are on the third floor, and by that floor your inventory is going to be almost full. But that's what we want you to feel, that this item is going to be really valuable. What item should I get rid of? Managing an inventory, you're always thinking, it's better to use this skill or it's better to use this one. It's better to carry this item or is it better to carry this other one? That's basically what games are about. Decision of what is better. In other games, it can go terribly wrong. For me, inventories bring frustration to the game when, like any other game system, when they do not cooperate with the main mechanic or feeling of the game. For example, if you are playing an action game like God of War or something like that, inventories can easily break the pace of the game. I know they are necessary to manage your skills and the equipment you have, but they can feel so tedious and so boring, and they can like break all the fun you were having, all that slaughtering you were making. For example, in Breath of the Wild, even if I love the game and I think it's a really great Zelda, I don't like that Skyrim mechanic of stopping the gameplay to eat a bunch of food. That mechanic breaks my experience for me, like continuously. That's something that is not pointing to the core mechanic of the game and is not adding to the game, to the experience you should be feeling. For example, Morrowind, maybe it wasn't the best inventory in the whole video game community, but I believe it kind of made the point for the game. Like, you really feel like an adventurer when you are organizing your equipment, when you are equipping your weapon and your armor and so on, but also when you are discovering what is this item, what does this thing do. I really like that mechanic in those games. Even if it is a little bit outdated, I really feel it points to the core experience of the game. Diegetic user interface or diegetic inventories are one of the possible evolutions that we could see into inventories, and that's why I really like Astroneer. It must have taken them a lot of effort to make that kind of inventory and interface, because the way it changes from first plane to the in-game view, it's really smooth. It doesn't break the pace of what you are playing, and it doesn't break the feeling of continuing playing the game. It's really good, really good. Games are becoming more usable. They have more efficient inventories, they have more logical inventories, but still it's difficult to find games that are using inventories to improve the core experience of the game. And I hope that's something that future games will change. I hope.